Welcome to Back to Reading Credits, a new 6-part audiovisual podcast from BRIC Radio celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip-hop and the people behind the curtain who drive the culture. I'm your host, BRIC President Wes Jackson. We have Lady Pink here with us on Zoom and in our virtual studio. Lady Pink was born in Ecuador, raised in New York City, and currently resides in the countryside north of the city. In 1979, she started writing graffiti and soon became well known as the only female capable of competing with the boys in the graffiti subculture. Pink painted subway trains from the years of 1979 to 1985. In 1982, she had a starring role in the motion picture classic Wild Style. That role and her other significant contributions to graffiti have made her a cult figure in the hip-hop subculture. While still in high school, she was already exhibiting paintings in art galleries, and at the age of 21 had her first solo show at the Moore College of Art. As a leading participant in the rise of graffiti-based art, Lady Pink's canvases have entered important art collections such as those at the Whitney, the Met Museum in New York City, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Groningen Museum of Holland. She has established herself in the fine arts world, and her paintings are highly prized by collectors. Today, Lady Pink continues to create new paintings on canvases that express her unique personal vision. She also shares her 42 years of experience with teens by holding mural workshops and actively lecturing to college students throughout the world. Welcome, Pink. I hope that bio did you justice.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You didn't butcher my bio. It's just fine. Going on about all that stuff. You did great. Thank you.
Okay, good. I want to make sure we pay proper respect. But so it's a pleasure to have you. You know, I think your presence as a visual artist is one of the elements that we have not covered enough. So we're really grateful to have you. So we can just get right into it. If you can kind of walk us back to those, it's the early 80s and you start writing. Is it fair to say you started with graffiti, writing on trains, and then moved into fine art? Or were you doing different types of art, then graffiti, and then back and forth? What's like the genesis of it all?
Well, at 15, I started writing graffiti for the fun of it, for kicks and giggles, for the fame, being down with the popular crowd, like all teenagers. And then I started in the High School of Art and Design, where I met guys who were actually painting subway trains. And that seemed really exciting and very challenging since, a majority of the sexist guys were saying you can't write graffiti because you're a girl. So I had to prove them wrong. And then when I got into the subway yards, subway tunnels, and saw my trains running, after we did it in the middle of the night against all odds with no training, no supplies, and just... then you see your trains running, and the rush and thrills and excitement was addictive. So I did that for a little bit, and just as I was starting, everything was going above ground. The motion pictures, the documentaries, the galleries. So the first group of guys exhibiting, felt they needed a female token. They literally came down to my high school. I was 16 years old and invited me to be down, with the elite of the graffiti writers. These guys were the best of the best, and I was still an amateur. I was a toy. But, I had to keep up with them, and I exhibited with them. And luckily, I had talent to back up the mouth that I had running. So the talent, kept me afloat, kept me going, kept me being invited back to all the other exhibits and all these things that were happening. So I was doing both things at the same time. One weekend I'm dressed up like a princess going to a nightclub or some rich collector's house or something, and being treated like a celebrity. And other weekends I'm running with my pack of teenage friends in some godforsaken neighborhood looking for a train yard to be painting some subway cars in, in extreme conditions. And then we call that fun.
Right. So was it quickly, how long... Well, I want to get back to the token comment because that's a heavy thing. But begin to set the same. So how quickly are you moving from hitting the trains to going to these collectors' house? Are we talking like a year, 6 months? Like how quickly was that journey?
That journey was within months.
Oh, wow.
Everything was happening. So, very quickly. I can say the first exhibit was December of 1980 at Fashion Moda in the South Bronx. And that was my first invitation to, put up a legal piece on canvas. And then the next show was like 3 months later at the new museum downtown, followed by PS1. By the time I turned 17, I was exhibiting at PS1 alongside Basquiat and Keith Haring.
It was back in 1975 that the terms punk and new wave were first used to describe a new youth culture that sprung up first in New York and shortly after in England.
I don't think that all of them are professionals right now, but I don't really worry about the word. I haven't worried about the word professionals. What's a professional? We're most of the musicians who made most of the good music for the last 4 years that comprise punk and new wave professionals. No. Yes and no. I think that the show, is still, it's the important thing to me is still for at least 50% of it is building a sociology of elements that kind of make up a scene or depict the scene.
Wow, that's
so
exciting.
Basquiat literally asked me to walk through one of his paintings with my bare feet on wet paint, leaving my little footprints behind one of his pieces. I'd never seen such abstract work or such crude, kind of style. I was going to art school. We were learning how to do art real perfect, crisp and neat and traditional. And this guy was going off on some crazy tangent, doing bizarre work and asking me to walk through his little painting. Okay, so that was my introduction to the art world. One thing rolled over another, gallery after gallery and documentary and traveling to for the premiere of the motion picture Wild Style and traveling the world and again signing autographs, being treated like a celebrity. All was happening very, very quickly. By the time I was 17, I was already famous around the city.
That's a lot at such a young age when the whole art form was seems like you were being discovered and rising as just like the art form is coming out of, not almost seemingly out of nowhere. There's got to be challenges for a teenage young woman, in the 80s, right? Or you seem like you have that strength where I don't see too many people getting over on you. But what was that like for you, the real you?
So for going above ground, literally from hanging out in ghetto neighborhoods with people of modest income, let's say, to being in fine marbled galleries and in rich people's houses and in penthouses and in high-rise buildings in the city, with doormen and all of that, elevators, they are crisp and beautiful. You never see that. So, here we are with that transition. It wasn't too far-fetched for me. I do come from good family. I have an uncle who was governor of the Galapagos Islands, another uncle who was mayor of a city in the biggest city in the Amazon rainforest of Ecuador, and my real father was senator. So, we do come from an upper-class kind of a family. I am used to being in polite society, and I have manners. So I was able to transition quite easily being above ground and being treated like a princess. I acted like a princess. When I was down in the ghetto with my homies, I acted like that. Outrageous and loud and all of that, all of those things that are fitting for the scene. So I was able to transition easily, which made it, easy for my friends to push me forward as a spokesperson because I was the more presentable sort, with a smile and a pretty face and good manners and all of that. And, my friends didn't have nearly all of that together. So I made a good spokesperson. I showed up on time. I spoke well. I was eloquent. I was young, but I could hold it together. So, it took all of that. It took talent. It took brains. It took, a bit of charisma and charming and making friends in the right places. Now, the guys were feeling the feminist movement, as in like they felt they needed to have women representing. They're like, oh, it's like a sausage fest. Oh, it's just a lot of guys. There had been females writing graffiti through the 70s, mind you. I am not the first. There were dozens and dozens of females, but they did mostly tagging, just getting up, bombing the city. And then after a couple of years, they grow up and they have to get lives. understandable. You know, that's not a sustainable career to just be tagging up. It's only going to lead to trouble. So you grow up, you know, you get a family, you go to school, you get a job. You can't be running around like a kid anymore. So, you know, they were all gone by the time I started in 79. And that's when things started to go above ground. So the talent helped back that up. I was able to paint large and big, and I was absolutely reckless in my wanting to paint that on trains and make it large. The guys kept saying, you can't. I was like, watch me. You know, I can do this. I'm small, I'm petite, barely weighed 100 pounds, but I could carry a big, heavy bag of paint, climb walls, and run train tracks, and you know, hide for 2 hours under a bush or something until the coast is clear. That's the kind of stuff that guys do, playing, you know, cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers. You all call that fun. You know, running amok, chasing each other. And yes, it's fun. It's super fun. It's not really built for girls. A lot of manual labor, a lot of physical stuff that teenage girls don't have that kind of upper body strength. But luckily I did. I was super strong as a kid. And again, reckless and desires to be a rebel. You know, I had 2 sisters and they didn't have those desires. They were good girls. They did what they were told. Now I had to jump out the window and go to the worst neighborhoods and hang around with some crazy people that, you know, scared my neighbors when they visited. And you know, this was my thing. You know, it's not for everyone.
No, I mean, listen, it's the true essence of what I think a writer is, right? Is so bold. And, you know, I think we mentioned this when we had our sort of pre-interview of, you know, one of the few artists that were risking your life to do your art, right? That changes, the energy is just fundamentally different. But can I say one thing? You were talking about your weight, but you said something the other day about your height, right? About most of those cats were very tall, so they could hit the top of the trains. So, and were you also much shorter than them? So what were you climbing? I mean, were you climbing up on the trains to hit the top, you know, to complete your piece?
You know, there were other guys that were young and they were also small. I wasn't the only one. So yes, you had to learn how to climb like a monkey, paint upside down, hanging out the window, hanging by your fingernails, standing on a little tiny edge, you know, as you figured it out. And it's hard enough to paint in the dark and, you know, stuff that you have memorized, because you can't take a sketch with you. One, you can't see it, and 2, you can't be caught with that kind of evidence. So you have to memorize it and then do it upside down in the dark. So come on, really, the teenagers were able to do these amazing pieces of work, you know, hundreds of whole cars and beautiful trains, you know, starting in the mid-70s. They got really, really big and beautiful in the mid-70s. And that went on until they cleaned off the trains in 89 completely. And now it's only for the tourists.
Yeah, then became that graffiti proof in the trains. I will say this, Pink. I love hearing you say that, because I've long made the case that a graffiti artist has to be the most talented artist you're ever going to see, because it's dark, right? There's no materials. There's maybe dogs running through the yard. People are literally trying to arrest you from doing your art. And then you said this thing about not even having the sketch because it's evidence. That's a heavy thought. I never thought about that. But imagine without maybe all of the training. Seems like you had a little bit of training, though. I guess that's my question. Did you have sort of fine art training as coming up in education?
Well, at 15, no. I was coming out of middle school, honestly. Yeah. And then I was starting in the High School of Art and Design, where as a freshman, you get to dabble in all kinds of everything, from photography to, illustration. And then in your second year, you got to pick a major. So I was going for architecture. So that was my field. My real dad was an architectural engineer. I have 2 brothers in Ecuador who are architectural engineers now. So, and I had that knack for engineering and architecture. I thought I would do that. But nope, I had a different calling. But we teach master to apprentice. We didn't need schooling or any of that. We teach master to apprentice, even if it's a kid your own age, if they just know a little bit more. So somebody taught me how to use spray paint correctly, how to get into the subway trains. Somebody else taught me how to do the proper letters and fonts and different teachers. Another person taught me how to spray paint correctly so that no one gets nabbed. All of this is handed down and taught. So, I already learned some of the mistakes other guys had made. No, you don't bring a sketch with you, because I guess some kid had to run and eat it while the cops were chasing him.
What?
And then so that way you don't bring a sketch with you, understand? Because otherwise you might have to eat that thing.
That is wild. But it's wild, but it makes total sense. Right? Like, because they get you in that with the Krylon or whatever you were using in that, you're done. Right? You're going to Spofford or I don't know.
Yeah, there was Spofford, and as the times have changed, laws have changed, and the cops get dirtier and they get sneakier, and then they just make up, a warrant and start raiding people's houses, and they start literally going into people's houses fishing, with a PS, fishing.
What, that happened to you? Sorry, Pink, did that happen to...
Twice.
Oh, wow.
Twice they raided my house. Once in 2003 and once in 2013. The one in 2003 they had to dismiss because there was no charges. But nevertheless, they took everything out of my house. In 2013, they came in with a SWAT team.
What?
Literally, guys with helmets and shields and guns drawn coming in my hallway. They had already taken my husband. But this time, because there's the Vandal Squad, the graffiti police,
yeah.
They've been around since the mid-'70s. They changed police cops over the years, of course, but they're still the Vandal Squad. They know the graffiti writers, they know the players, they know where they live, they know their real names. Some of the young cops were trained to run into the subway tunnels because the older cops couldn't.
Right.
Ooh, they're too big. Anyway, so the Vandal Squad gets the SWAT team to come in and raid our house one more time, take all my paint and photos and books off my shelves and my computers. This time they took my computers and all my work, everything, walked out the door with the cops. And they can legally keep this stuff for like a year and a half for an open investigation. And they have to file charges. And what they had wasn't holding any water and had to be dismissed right away. But that was what drove me out of the city. I had enough of the police raids, for no reason at all. We don't break the law. We haven't done anything illegal. They couldn't find the damn thing. They're doing fishing, looking through stuff through my computer to see if we have some connection to some project that happened in Brooklyn in an abandoned subway station, blah, blah, blah. We had no connection to those people. But that's what they thought. This book that came out, oh, here, look, page 49, looks like that guy's work. Let's go raid his house. What are you like saying, look at this cubism. That looks like Picasso. Let's go raid his house. What about all the other guys who do cubism and stuff, Who are you? Who made you an art critic or, an art expert that you can identify this guy? Anyway, that didn't hold water. It was bullshit. It was just another excuse to make me spend money on an expensive attorney, Stacy Richmond, who looks out for us, who goes up against the Vandal Squad all the time and their bullshit, charges. She protects a few of the graffiti groups in New York City who have to endure these raids and the Vandal Squad circling our house like vultures, and trying to get us for no reason just because we inspire others. And they wish to outlaw inspiration because I inspire others, artists, photographers, poets, community people to keep it clean and have pride in their community. That's what we do. But no, the police hate us and then they drove me out. I moved out 11 years ago. Fuck them.
Oh man, I love you. I love you. This is, but I can't understand why is a SWAT team necessary? Is it really this sort of uber capitalism of the destruction of property? Is that what they were fighting against? I think what you're saying about anti-inspiration is makes real sense to the real me. But what was their claim? What was the damage that you were doing? That would...
I don't know. It wasn't me in particular. I married a graffiti writer and they'd been after him for, well over 30, 35 years, unable to prove anything. So the Vandal Squad found out my husband had been driving trains for 5 years. He actually got hired to drive subway cars,
wow. Okay.
Subway trains. He was not a happy guy. That's a hard company to work for. They're really ass backwards and everything. Anyway, he's driving trains for 5 years, turning into a miserable, angry zombie. And then the Vandal Squad finds out that Smith, which they allege that he is Smith, is driving trains. No, they got to come up with something. So they got a flimsy warrant. They arrested him on his way home from a train yard. And then they raided our house for anything that they can lift and find. Again, trying to connect him to some project in Brooklyn we never heard of, knew nothing about, some book that came out. We knew nothing about that, but there they were at the door. And apparently the SWAT team, we read in the New York Times like a little later, that they just sit around bored. You can order them for whatever reason and stuff. They show up with a big old truck that says SWAT on the front. My neighbors were horrified. They loved us. They thought we were upstanding citizens. We took care of the block. We took care of everyone there and stuff. And now they had to see us that. Now, I wasn't arrested. But I had to sit there with handcuffs and watch them take stuff out of my house for hours and hours and hours. I had to sit there with a policewoman. And they took off the handcuffs when I promised to play nice. But this is, again, 2 times they raid us. And in all that time, my husband said that we had to keep our stuff away from our house in storage elsewhere because we were expecting these fucks. And sure enough, they came. They came twice. But they couldn't get the good stuff because it never lived in our house. It had to live somewhere else because these dirty cops take stuff. Any photos of anyone doing graffiti, any videos or anything that are even remotely incriminating or anything precious. My black books, my old art, my early stuff, everything lived outside the house because these people are thieves. The cops are the thugs with the guns.
Yeah, that is heavy. I've never heard a story like that. That is very intense. And I'm glad that you seem to be, I don't say not over, but like I would be still pretty bitter and upset if I were you. So I think it's another credit to you, your strength of spirit.
This story was covered in the New York Times right after it happened too, so verified truthfulness and all of that. This was in 2013, in May, at the beginning of the mural season. So they cleaned out all my spray paint that I have had since I was 16 years old. I've had hundreds of cans. Guys always wanted to get a hold of my paint, and I wouldn't let them touch my paint. My husband had to put a ring on me to get a hold of my paint. Anyway, the police cleaned me out. They took everything I had, and I had to buy all new paint for the beginning of the mural season. I go into a paint shop, and I start crying because I've never had such empty shelves. Completely, 100%. They took everything. So the cops are miserable. I don't need to deal with those people as if it's not hard enough to be an artist. I have to deal with that. So they did that to a few other people as well. Anyone that had the nerve to put out a book, organize an event, put out a documentary, put out a podcast, they're going to be at your door, man.
Ugh. Well, can I, you said something in there that I maybe we'll get to kind of like a little bit of a brighter light on it is, you view your job as inspiring the community. So I would love to hear how that your process and maybe how you see that manifesting in the actual pieces that you create, whether they were graph pieces, and I know you're doing all different types of art now. But tell me a little bit more about that teenager, the inspiration for that teenager and the inspiration for this, this established artist, that's in front of us now.
So my inspiration as a teenager, all the only people I had to look up to were my own homies, my friends, and then we all had, hierarchy in our subculture. So we had the elite. These were like the best of the best. These guys were already in their early 20s. We treated them like celebrities. When we met them, we want their autograph, and they're heroes to us, and they're the masters. They're the first generation. So when we're painting in the daytime, then we have to be sensitive and thoughtful to the community and really figure what we're giving a gift to someone. When we were painting on subway trains anonymously at night, it didn't really matter what we were doing. We didn't have to stand up to it or anything like that. But when you are a guest in somebody's neighborhood and you're leaving behind a gift like that'll become part of their lives. They see it every day, back and forth. You probably walk away. So you have to be thoughtful and think about that. And sometimes when you get a permission wall, you can't do crazy controversial stuff. So something decorative and if the community wants something like that, then that's what we'll do. So, we love to gift community's artwork because it's necessary to bring it above ground and expose everyone to culture, not just billboards and advertising, which is what you see in poor communities, but artwork. Sure, and we're the only ones that actually give a hoot for our own communities that will come out and paint something beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I also just want to lift up something else you said, that it's a gifted, your art being a gift. Because I remember those pre-graffiti proof trains, and you would catch, because you only had a day, right? Maybe a couple of hours before they painted it off, of going to school and being like, oh, somebody got up in the yard. It did really feel like a gift, right? Because somebody risked their lives to bring a little bit of brightness, to that commute. And obviously everybody else was calling it vandalism. But even as a shorty, I was like, nah, this is beautiful, But I love that framing of a gift. I never thought about it like that.
And I like it. I like the way you said that. Yes, it is vandalism, but it is also art. It can be both. It can be both. It is, not. And if you look through history, there's been times when people do art that isn't the accepted norm. So they call it blasphemy, and they'll burn you at the stake. So if you don't do what anyway. So yes, it is vandalism because the trains did not belong to the teenagers. But about 20% were artists that really wanted to do something beautiful on the outside. So they stay all night long. You have to go in middle of the night, and the trains pull out in the morning by 5 or 6 in the morning for the rush hour. So that is your deadline. You have to go because that train will start to roll away, and it's hard to paint when you're running. And so
you ever had to do that? You had to paint while it was rolling out the yard?
No, you couldn't. You can beg all you can to the motorman, please don't take the train, and I'll put your name up, but they're like, I have to go, I'm on schedule, I gotta go. So, that was the best that we can do. We tried to do a little bit of beauty, bring a smile to the commuters and such, but it was mostly for ourselves, for props and to get up, move up in that hierarchy and such. Even though we didn't know these people, at the end of the subway line, other writers saw it, and then we saw their work and competed against each other, and the movement was growing. Thousands and thousands of kids all over the city wanting to outdo each other, inventing stuff, inventing styles, inventing new ways of getting these trains. As the police and the transit authority battled us, we battled them, and it was a great war. That was the man that we had to fight against, and you need an adversary to get the blood boiling and such. So
yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that idea, I don't think, if you're not really, and I was never a graph writer. I guess you would call me like an annoying toy that would just write things that made no sense when I was 10 years old. But that idea of, you put it up, because where were you uptown? Am I right, Pink? You were.
I'm from Astoria, Queens. I'm from a good neighborhood, but yeah, I had to go. I had to go all over the city.
So were you hitting the train yards in in Queens, or were you going to Bronx, Brooklyn, wherever?
So my first group of friends, they were from the Boogie Down Bronx, and it was definitely way cooler than the Queens. Eventually Queens became cool once some of the rappers made it cool, but at first, no, that was a soft borough. And my friends from the Bronx were way cooler. So I would go and frequent yards that were more in the Bronx. But eventually, as the guys would go around slandering me that I wasn't actually painting my own trains, I was having sex with the boys in the yards to get that up. Oh, my Lord. But, guys are dogs. They try to hit on me when they get turned down. They'll turn around and tell their friends, yeah, I had her on her knees. Oh, they're not going to admit defeat. Anyway, guys are just like that, especially teenage boys. And so I literally had to go paint with different groups all over New York City. The white guys in deep Queens, the Spanish guys in Brooklyn, the black dudes in the Bronx and whatever, so they can see me paint my own work. That's an issue for all women street artists that sneak out of their mama's house with like 5 handsome young men and, go out and do things in the middle of the night. Mother can only hope that she's just painting.
Right. Yeah, I know. That's right. And I imagine, I mean, I'm obviously, I'm not a woman, but that's a struggle for any successful woman. There's always that.
Yeah, I mean, if you had some daughters.
I have a daughter and I have a wife. I know. And I think as a man, I've seen it. I've seen that terrible behavior of like, oh, she's doing really well, it has to be this other thing, which is crazy. But can you talk to me about like that communication, right? You're putting something up and maybe it starts in the yard in the Bronx and it goes all the way through Brooklyn, and then maybe a couple days later, you're seeing almost like a response to your work by somebody else in another yard. Just about two questions, like that exchange, if you could describe that to a non-writer, and is there a piece that you saw go through the system that you were like, they can't top that, and maybe something that came back and you were like, oh my God, that thing is, whoever that is ill?
So in general, we rolled in crews of 4 or 5 people, and crews became prestige. You put other people down. So it was like, our crew did this, and now another crew in Brooklyn wants to top us, and so on. And just rivalries over the years is what made better work. But, I had one piece rolling that I painted a week after John Lennon died. I did with Is the Wiz. Big white guy from Rockaway, Queens. We did the Beatles and John Lennon train, 2 married cars, which means that they can never split them up. And we painted that a week after he died, which I think was 1981, December 7th or something that he died. So we painted that, and Is the Wiz calls me up and says, oh my God, they just shot John Lennon. We got to paint the train for him. And my first response was like, who's John Lennon?
Oh.
Joe, I grew up with disco, man. I grew up with my favorite Donna Summer. I knew of the Beatles, but I didn't know them by name. And then he explains, it's like one of the Beatles. Oh my God, of course, that is huge. That was monumental. So we went out and we painted a John Lennon train, and that rolled for 4 years. 4 years.
Wait.
I saw it like 4 years later.
How did it last that long? I've never heard of anything that long.
Could read it. It was straight letters, John Lennon, the Beatles, very straight letters. You could totally read it, and you can see that. And it was also on the third car was a friend of ours, Kaz. He did a top to bottom blue Kaz, C-A-Z, and that rolled as a ghost. You could just see the ghost image of it, which means that they pulled it into the buff, the wash, the acid wash, up to that point, and they would not buff the John Lennon. And then they just reversed the train, and they're like, nope, we'll erase this part, but not the John Lennon, not the Beatles.
Wait, are you telling me, so it goes into the yard, and even the workers had so much respect that for 4 years, they wouldn't? Wow.
And it rolled. I happened to stumble on it. Again, 4 years later, I'm taking the train on 59th and Lexington, and my train rolls in front of me. And then I could count exactly when we did it, because we did it a week after John Lennon died. So there was a date for that. And, it was photographed and documented by Henry Chalfant after we did it. And so anyway, the workers are here in the 7 yard in Queens, right before they buffed and erased any graffiti, they would document it, take photos, and then they put it up on their wall. They had a big wall inside the maintenance shed with photos of all the nice graffiti that they had. They had to clean it, but at least they took photos and they appreciated and collected it.
Oh, of course, because those are probably, it was their job to kind of destroy your art, but they probably were more with you than not in their hearts.
Yeah. I think so. And surprisingly, a lot of graffiti writers over the years went to work for transit. Like I said, even my husband went to drive subways for a little while. Others have worked everywhere from the mechanics to supervisors up in management. They're everywhere.
Why do you think that is? That seems strange, but is it you're so familiar with the infrastructure because you're in there all the time? Did you ever ask your husband, how did you go from one side of the table to the other?
Oh, well, he's always been a train buff. A lot of guys are train buffs, any kinds of trains and stuff like that. So, they like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does make sense. And they know, I guess if I was on MTA, I'd be like, my system. You're probably pretty talented. About married cars. I think we're gonna need a glossary to go with this thing, because married cars, ghosts, toys, getting up, all city. I'm not gonna.
We had our own language.
Right? Can you speak on that a little bit?
Since graffiti writers, we had to have secret life that no one knew about. We had a secret language and stuff that we can speak to each other, and people didn't know exactly what we were referring to and stuff like that. Other slang than just general slangs for stuff. I mean, what we called going out and painting a lot of graffiti was called bombing. And after 9/11, when you used words like that, things were triggered on the telephone and places and anyway, we couldn't use that anymore. But that is essentially what we did. We'd go out bombing and tagging up and getting up just like a bomb exploded in your town or something. There's a lot of code words. I recall my sister, translating for me because I didn't know how to get out of it, out of my slang.
She had to translate you back. She had to translate you back to English because.
Yeah. But it's important when you're playing I Spy. When you're a criminal underneath it all, and when you have the actual police at your door making up charges, so it isn't a game. And kids have died painting subway trains, under mysterious circumstances or whatever, or just kids being kids. You grab that rail, you get electrocuted. You're in the wrong spot at the wrong time. I think not too long ago, 2 French riders got run over by subway cars in New York City. I think that it's crazy underground. They underestimated something, and the train ran them over. It was sad. 2 young men.
I think this is, Pick, we were talking about this the other day. I want to maybe do this. I want to talk about your other art. So make sure people understand, the breadth of you as an artist. But I think this idea of how much of what we associate or what people attribute to sort of hip hop culture really is graffiti culture without the credit. And I wonder, I've always said this there, I wonder what you think, this idea of these pseudonyms, right? That rappers would never give you their real name. That's a graffiti thing. Because to what you're saying, if we actually put out, Wes Jackson is Lady Pink, I got the cops at my door. Right. So you all put that into the energy is, Sean Carter has to be Jay-Z. And this dual citizenship really comes back, to really the essence of graffiti. Would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. But we aren't the first to have like stage names, per se, because our real name is inappropriate for some reason or another, and as we know all our friends, but only by their graffiti names. It's again, inappropriate to ask for someone's real name or anything like that. You don't do that. And at this point, I don't like being called by my legal name at all. This is the way how we drag you into our weird world of artistic, creativity, music or art or whatever. We're eccentric, we're strange, and you got to call me by that weird name. And when people try to be proper and call me like Miss Fabara, I was like, well, that's insulting. That's dead naming. It's called dead naming when you ignore somebody's chosen name.
Yeah.
And that applies for trans people and everyone. You have a chosen name and you got to respect that. I've had this name for 44 years. At what point do you think you can call me by my last name? I know you're trying to be proper. You were brought up proper, but this is our world. Welcome to our world. And now you got to call me by that weird name.
Well, I don't think. Well, let's just be. It ain't weird. It's dope. It's like I think it's a great name. But you read my mind. I just looked down at the bio, and we never once say your government, and it didn't even cross my mind to even ask you or even put it. It seemed to be. Even put it out there would be a violation. And you remember when we did the pre-interview, I asked you, should I call you Lady Pink or Pink? I ain't even asked for the government. It would be weird, right? I would be insulting to ask you that.
Well, yeah, you would be, because you understand and you know hip hop, and a lot of young people that write me blindly and ask me to, talk about their paper or interview me for something. They refer to me as Lady Pink. It's only the old folks that feel that it's proper. As soon as I see them using my proper name, I'm like, oh, this person's got to be old. They're not getting it. And then they're telling me in their letter that they're hip hop experts. I'm like, I don't think so. So then the first thing we point out is like, okay, you missed lesson number 1. If our name is Ludacris or Queen Latifah or whatever, Prince, Madonna, Cher, it goes back. It goes back. People making up weird names, and you better honor that. So, none of that proper stuff. So
I love it. So can I do it just before? I do want to talk about, I can't let you go without talking about Wild Style. We got a little bit more time. I'm on the outside like a little schmuck. You tell me on the inside, what was that experience? How do you view it?
So in the early 80s, a whirlwind of activity, documentaries and books and film shoots and travel, all kinds of everything going on, galleries. And then there's this rich guy, Charlie Ahern, running around with a film crew filming us. His script was loose, and as he was meeting people, I threw a surprise party for Lee on his 21st birthday and invited my homeboys' Rocksteady crew, because I was going to high school with those, and he was one of the breakdancers. They came along, and they did all this breakdancing, amazing stuff, and Charlie was like, oh my God, I have to put them in my movie. And as he met people, he saw the love story between myself and Lee. It was a 4-year stormy romance, actual romance. He wrote our love story into the film. There was no acting coaches, no makeup, no wardrobe, the dialogue that Charlie wrote. And he was a proper white guy with a good upbringing. He couldn't write slang. So we laughed at his dialogue and then made up our own. And it was just a loose movie. No one took it seriously at all. No one imagined that it would go anywhere or still be around like 40 years later or more. And if we had, we would have, done a better job and such. But the budget of that film was literally $25,000. Only a few people got paid. Everybody else was an extra. There's a scene in there with that white lady, Patty Astor, who just passed. She's in a car and a bunch of little kids are pushing it. That was very organic. That actually happened in real life. That wasn't planned or prompted or anything. The car literally ran out of gas and all these kids poured down the street and helped push it. One other scene, there's a couple of muggers with a sawed-off shotgun, and they hold up Patty Astor and Lee outside of a nightclub. Those are real muggers. That's a real shotgun. That was not props. These people were not paid.
I know the scene you're talking about. That was a real stick-up.
Yeah. That's a real. That was, those guys were hired. That's what they do. That's what they do, and that was a real shotgun. So it was very, very authentic. We rented a train yard, and the Transit Authority never did that again. And we got to paint an actual train. We rented that, but we weren't taking it seriously. There was a lot of other things going on. There's a documentary called Style Wars, and that was funded by PBS. That was more, a proper documentary, and we're taking very seriously. The other thing was just, another film crew with a bunch of guys, and no one was seriously imagining it would go anywhere. Who would guess? We were told that the art market, all of this is very, very fickle, changes its mind quickly. So write it while you can. It's going to evaporate and disappear, and you'll have to get a real job and all of that stuff. So have fun while you can.
Right. So when it came out, I guess, did it start to blow up? Because I didn't see it until much after the release. It was pretty much of it was quickly a hit. Am I right? You knew this was something.
Yes, it was. It was released on Times Square and for a few weeks, and then it got extended, and I think it stayed in that theater for something like 13 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then it started to go into all sorts of other cities, and it went abroad. We all went to Japan, to Tokyo, and a couple of other cities, and it's the first time that Japan had ever seen anything of hip-hop, much less graffiti or anything like that. They were instantly in love, and it just spread all over the world, and it kept happening because it was such a pure film. The second film was by Harry Belafonte, and then Hollywood got to, change a little bit and soften it and sell it to the masses. They did have Rocksteady in that, but the whole formula was changed. Wild Style is very raw, very authentic, but the love story. I had nightmares about this guy for ages, and we have this long, wet kiss in that film. No, you can't make me watch it. I can't watch it. I haven't seen that in over 2 decades. Maybe more. But I will come and speak at the end of the movie, and I love Charlie. He's still a dear friend, the director, and I'm in touch with the other people as well. But I won't watch the film. I will support it, though.
Yeah, I think for anybody listening or watching should understand, right? That we kind of buried the lead, right? The crux of the narrative of one of the first hip hop films is sitting in front of us. It is yeah, it's amazing. I don't want to say I must have forgot it, but I'm so got caught up in these other stories I'd never heard. What am I? And now did that? Now my question is, post Wild Style, did you see did it sort of elevate your career as a visual artist, or did they kind of exist in two separate pockets?
It's existed in separate worlds in a way, and it still does. You know, there's the hip hop, which we feel is a little bit more of the entertainment field, the dancers and musicians and all of that. And then there's the fine arts and the arts. We are embroiled in being titled street art. And that has no background music or dancers. Everyone's in their own little world listening to their own type of music, but still doing legal and illegal visual work all over the world, and we're titled as street artists. So that kind of, lived in separate worlds. In a way, that movie Wild Style stereotyped me, and I was there at the beginning. I witnessed the birth of hip-hop, the very first Sugar Hill album, and I was singing it all along, and everything was so cool when it was party, 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 everyone say ho, and I was cool. And then in the 90s, things started to change all gangster-like, and then women started to be singled out more for disrespect. And I was starting to, not really feel that movement. I was into my own kind of music. I wasn't, liking the attitude. The music also changed, a lot of gangster stuff and some harsh lyrics. I wasn't too fond of that. And now I listen to an eclectic collection of music. And my favorite is Missy Elliott, but that I draw the line there. I don't listen to any other kind of hip hop, honestly. And, I listen to everything from Spanish guitar to rock and roll. Favorite band of all time is Metallica and System of a Down, I gotta say. So that is where my head is at. I'm a headbanger. But I am considered a hip-hop icon. Hip-hop icon. Fine, I'll take it. It's all good.
Yeah, and I want to get into that because, that came up when we were talking before about you feeling the need to kind of separate, your legacy as a graffiti artist from what I guess the mainstream calls sort of hip hop. So just tell the people a little bit more of that, because I think you have a very interesting take that people need to hear.
So I think that the word hip hop was coined out of the movie Wild Style in the early 80s. If not that movie, right from that era and that time. But graffiti had been around since the late 1960s in New York City. So there'd been a whole decade long full of, people painting to Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and Donna Summer, and Earth, Wind, and Fire, and folks grooving to their tunes and not being called hip-hop at all. And graffiti writers are so single-mindedly focused on what they're doing, getting paint, scouting out train yards, getting into the train yards, everything we eat and breathe, spray paint and trains, and have no time for anything else, no music, no dancing or anything. But so it only hit, some people were exposed to the music and all of that only if you lived in some neighborhoods in New York City. Not all neighborhoods. Not until everything started to go up above ground and there were events and openings and galleries and festivals and parties, and then they start to play hip-hop music at every graffiti event. And all the early exhibits and stuff like that, they also insisted on bringing in breakdancers to turn it all into a circus. So when we're trying to be respectable, it turns into a festival of kids just freewheeling, and they still try to push that on us today, 40 years later. It's like, oh, we're going to have breakdancers and a DJ at your opening. It's like, oh my God. So much for trying to be respectable. They make it so hard. They want the entertainment. Sure, it sells tickets, but it does, take away our dignity a bit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Now I'm putting together like the beginning of your conversation. It seems to be it's the order of operations are wrong, right? Now they're trying to, graffiti kind of birthed a lot of this, but they almost trying to treat you like the children of it. Right? Is it's sort of backwards. Is that fair?
In order for a subculture to exist and be called and considered a subculture, it needs to have visuals like art, dance, music, fashion, All of these things, I don't know exactly the list, but we need to be in there in order for hip hop to be considered a subculture. Otherwise, it's just, a genre of music.
Right.
Just like any other genre of music,
right.
Punk, rock, pop, whatever. To be a bona fide subculture, you need the visuals, you need some fashion, you need, I don't know, like I said, even our language, the way we speak, the way, the some of the slang, and you need all of those things combined to become a bona fide subculture. So that's why we're thrown in there. And it's the advertising companies that did it. The corporations, they figured this is how we market it and sell it to the masses. Water it down, dilute it a little bit, and then sell it to the masses. As with any underground, culture that has happened underground, going back to, earlier, the turn of the last century, the 1950s is a huge example of whatever's underground, like rock and roll and all that groovy stuff, goes above ground, gets diluted, gets sold to the masses. And that's just the nature of things, as we would expect. But we have, graffiti writers working in all of these fields, from fashion to the film industry to advertising. And we can control the integrity of our style somewhat. We're not being completely robbed by the advertising companies because they can't do it correctly. Combine those letters and fonts and stuff like that. They need a bona fide street artist to make it look good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed. Totally agreed. I do. I want to talk about a little. We've done a great history lesson, but I don't want to make sure you give you some time to talk about the now. So Lady Pink, the artist? What are some of the projects you're working on now? Like, is it sort of morphed and changed? Are you doing different types of pieces? Yeah, just tell me about what's going on today with you and your art.
What am I doing now? You can see some artwork behind me. I've always got a big canvas going on. There's always gallery exhibits and fancy places, Paris and Italy and such, and I've always got to have a body of work. That is my primary function. My paintings are in some of the great museums in the world that will be preserved for centuries for people to, appreciate my work. And that is, my main goal to do. But I do work with, teenagers. I do mural workshops. I've got like 4 schools lined up for the next year. And we paint large murals in the communities. So I like to hand down my skills, my craft. I get an art education grant, so there's funding. I work with art schools and regular public schools and middle schools and such. I make the kids design their own work and I help them put it up because, kids love to paint large, but they don't like to run from the police nearly as much as we do. I don't get
it. What's wrong with you kids? Why are you acting so safe?
Yeah, but right?
Can I ask you, Pink, because I keep the piece behind you, I can't stop staring at it. It's so rich. Is your style and I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but that doesn't look like a graffiti. It's not a traditional graffiti piece.
It's a self-portrait.
Oh, is that okay? It's beautiful. But it's
a self-portrait of me with flowers and a bird in my head.
So the style has grown since the graffiti days in beautiful ways.
Pretty early on, we decided that just doing our names and, in elaborate fonts was not enough. We had everyone's attention. And some of us that can illustrate and paint all kinds of everything else, we're flexing our skills and doing stuff. I do political work, social work. All my paintings have stories. I fight for justice when I can. Bringing attention to a cause that needs awareness and such. And, sometimes it's just decorative. Right there, I've got a self-portrait going on, maybe inspired a little bit by Frida Kahlo. I gotta say, she did so many portraits of herself. So there it goes. Myself with my garden, all my flowers, and a little parakeet on my head. I've always had aviaries. I have an aviary and birds and such, tame birds. So a little bit of me going on there. But another nice fun project we're doing next is a 5-story building in Singapore.
Oh, wow.
And they've asked me to do something controversial. Ooh, how exciting. I don't often get to do something controversial, but this is all the way over in Singapore. I got to pick kind of a global spanning controversy. War, the environment, the women's rights. So I'm going to have a meeting with the guy, get some art direction. He wants it to be the talk of the town. I'm like,
So is
okay.
it's like a private developer, the owner of the building?
It is a private developer, and a 5-story building, like 3 sides. I get to do something crazy. Ooh, what fun. I quoted him really high, and he's like, that's no problem. So I'm going to send my team out there, my husband and 3 assistants to do it. I probably will not be going. I've been to Singapore already. But nevertheless, I have a team of people, and I design stuff, and I send them out to do it. Sometimes I go myself, but we're always busy, exhibiting, workshops with kids, murals around the world. It's nonstop.
I have to say, you do it, after listening to you for the past hour, you doing a 5-story building, and getting paid properly to do it seems to make a lot of sense. From hanging upside down on trains, it seems to be light work for you right now. But it seems to be the logical evolution. I want a graffiti artist. Who better?
Yes, well, we work fast. We work no nonsense. That unlike traditional muralists who are slow as molasses, so we can meet a good budget and get that done. I think 2 weeks, and then that building will be done. It'll be amazing. So I find that graffiti was an education for us. Some people go to university. We went to the train yards. That taught us confidence, courage, no nonsense. Taught us how to be innovative, how to think on your feet and get things done. It taught us street smarts in order to succeed as artists. So there was a bit of schooling. That's what I call that. Boot camp for artists.
Boot camp for artists, that without question. So I got two simple questions, and I'm going to give you to say the last word. Who was an artist that the 17-year-old Pink was inspired by, and who's maybe an artist that the Pink that's in the lady Pink that's in front of me right now is currently inspired by?
Well, the first piece that I sold was a purple orchid done in spray paint, and they said it looked like Georgia O'Keeffe's work. And I was like, I don't know who that is. So someone showed me a book, and I was 17, good grief. I didn't know anything. So I see her work, and I fell in love with her work immediately. She's a Art Deco from the 1920s, 1930s, and she lived like a feminist. She was a strong-willed woman, and I read about her life story, and she inspired me fully. So her art, her life story, and all of that. And I got to exhibit with her in 1985.
Oh, you did?
In the same gallery as Georgia O'Keeffe. Yes.
What?
Oh, my God. She was too old to travel up to New York for that, but I worked on together in the same show. I have it in a catalog, which is just brilliant.
Wow.
I love her. So her life story inspired me and still does today. Another one is I mentioned Frida Kahlo, and then some of my own homegirls like Mickey from the Netherlands, Shiro from Japan, and, Alice Mizrahi from New York City and all. There's just so many, people that inspire me. Even this kid right over here, she's like, 19 years old? She's been painting with me since she was 15. And she's in college now. You going?
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Yeah, I saw her behind you working. Yeah.
So, she's unlike any other teenager in her university. She can do big murals. She's traveled the world. She's done so much. And that's what I did as a kid. You just need grown-ups to believe in you and give you these opportunities, I took her out of her senior year of high school and sent her to 4 countries in Europe. Started to paint in London, and then Spain, followed by Italy, and then Germany. For a whole month, her parents approved of me taking her out of school and going to go paint all these amazing things, including a launch with Louis Vuitton. When I launched a hand-painted sneaker that they did limited edition, Nikki was there with us for the launch and the fancy party at the Louis Vuitton shop with, and being treated like princesses. And staying in the most expensive hotel in Milan, Italy, it does something to you. As a kid, when I saw my first painting in some rich lady's house, I was like, yo, that's what I want. Look at this, that's what I want. I'm going to work my ass off to get this. So, it opens up some eyes for sure.
Well, this is great. Well, listen, Ms. Lady Pink, this has been an inspiration. I want to give you, if there's anything else we didn't cover, I'm going to give you the last word to talk your talk before we sign off.
The advice that I like to give upcoming young artists, and that's, from graffiti artists, street artists, musicians, and dancers, and all, is that it's half talent and half business. In order to be a success, you got to have to learn the business. If you don't want to do the business, you hire someone that can help you out with you. If you are born with an amazing talent and you know people are going to try to take advantage of you and you don't understand the business, but you need a little bit of help, in New York City, at least, they have volunteers lawyers for the arts. They'll help you read a contract. They'll help you, promote yourself and all of that. This is the way things are done so that folks don't take advantage of you and exploit you, which is, what young talent is always there for. So, we teach master to apprentice. We help each other out and all of that and learning who are going to take advantage of you. But otherwise, learn some business and check out some of the volunteers lawyers for the arts, and they'll help you out.
Yeah, that's great. We use them actually at BRIC too. That is a wonderful piece of advice. Protect that IP, right, at all costs.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, listen, I want to thank our guests for the podcast today, Ms. Lady Pink. Clearly, she's a hip hop icon. She'll take it, but clearly, she's so much more. And I've learned, my OGs told me about you, and I've studied your work. But this has been so eye-opening for me, and I think I know a lot. And it's always great to hear from the source. And I just thank you for all of the knowledge you dropped on us. And we wish you the best. And when you want to come back down from north of the city, you come and see us. Sounds like we should do a Lady Pink retrospective down in the gallery. I think. I don't know. That's just my mind moving. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me, man. This has been awesome.